Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Inga Cotton. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms. And Charter Mom Chats are a series of live stream videos that I've been doing since March to help families learn what's going on with distance learning, with getting students safely back on campus, with learning activities that they can do at home. And today I'm really grateful to have two of the amazing leaders from Compass Rose Public Schools, which is a relatively new charter school network on the south side of San Antonio. And I hope to help spread the word about it, and I hope that it makes y'all curious to learn more about the great work that they're doing. But the reason is that I've invited them to, they're subject of a blog post on shchartermoms.com, and also to talk on Charter Moms Chats, is that I feel like Compass Rose is showing leadership in terms of their planning and their curriculum development and their communication with stakeholders to adapt to the coronavirus pandemic. So, I want to hold them up as an example of, good practices and how they're staying true to their mission, which is serving students on the south side of San Antonio and giving them a great education and doing it in a very human-centered way. So let me talk about the team members we have here. So her full name is Chawanna Chambers, but I call her Dr. Shea. And she is her roles at Compass Rose involve curriculum and technology. So she does things like develop blended learning curriculum and the virtual learning, and we'll get she can explain more about it. But and it's always, she's shy about it, but I always try to put the doctor in there because there aren't that many, the people with doctorates should represent. Okay, now I'm embarrassing her. Okay, and then we also have Paul Morrissey, who's the founder and CEO of Compass Rose Public Schools. And I remember when I first met him in San Antonio, he was a BES fellow, which is it's kind of a way to train leaders who will go on to found some really amazing schools of choice. And Paul's background is that he was a teacher and a school leader at Basis, which we have Basis schools in San Antonio, but he was working in DC. And Paul is a hockey fanatic, right?
That's right.
Which I guess that's why they're the polar bears, right? At Legacy.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. Okay.
Partially.
And he's from Massachusetts. So yeah, again, with the polar bears are not a common mascot around here, but we welcome diversity. So okay, so thank you, Shay, and thank you, Paul, for being on Charter Moms Chats and for sharing about what Compass Rose is doing to take really good care of all of your people during the pandemic. So should I go ahead and jump into the questions?
Yeah, I think that sounds
good.
Great.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. So the school year started on August 17th, right? And it started with distance learning, but by now you have some students back on campus. So can you, just tell us about how that's been going? Maybe we could start with Paul.
Yeah. So, I mean, the upshot is it's going really well so far, but not without its challenges. And this is a challenging time for everyone, for schools, from leadership level to teachers. And then, of course, it's a challenging time for families and students. So, yeah, I think overall, we feel really good about where we are right now. We're always learning. I think one of the things that I'm proudest of in our organizational culture is this commitment to continuous improvement, and what better time to be committed to continuous improvement than now, when we are building, when we're all building the plane as we fly it. But really, you said the school year started August 17th. For us, this school year really started in March of last school year, when we first had to shut down schools across the state of Texas. Even then, we started thinking at Compass Rose about what the late summer and fall were going to look like, because the moment that the state took the extraordinary measure to tell us to shut down across the state, all schools to shut down, it was pretty clear that this was going to be something that was going to impact schooling this year. So I think part of the reason why we feel like we have been relatively successful so far is that we were, from the beginning in March, really focused on getting this year right. And it's also thanks to great work from Dr. Shea in particular, that we're at where we are, or that we are where we're at right now. So I'll let her talk a little bit about, how it feels from the academic lens.
Yeah. So I think for what I'm really, really proud about is how we work together as a team. I've mentioned this to other folks before, but I think his Paul's leadership and his ability to see things that were going to come later. We know everyone else is kind of like, nah, it won't happen. And like kind of pushing us to still plan just in case, I think set us up to be really successful this school year. So yes, we have been planning for August since March. It was kind of like, all right, let us get where we need to be for the spring. And then now we need to start looking at what this is going to be for us in the fall. And so we were, when it comes to like the curriculum and all of those things, we had already had some things in the works. And so what COVID did was just like pushed us a little bit faster to get there, and then just helped us answer or ask some very specific questions on how we could adapt to the ever-changing situation of, okay, we just got this new legislation. Oh, wait, no. Last week they said this, but yesterday they said this. So I think in trying to work with all that flexibility as a team, we were able to like divide and conquer and get us to a really good place at the beginning of the school year. And then just laying out that training for our teachers and our staff going into the new school year, I think helped make us successful too.
I wanted to ask, there was something that when we had all of us, y'all's COVID team took time to talk to me about how things were going during the summer. And one thing that stuck out was the idea that you were able to take some things that you were already doing pre-COVID, and then you were able to like add new things and do this kind of mixed approach. And, whereas I've seen some schools, they'll just take old stuff and just try to make it work virtually. Whereas other schools, they'll sort of throw all that out and try to find like a new virtual only thing. But I think this mixed approach is interesting. So I was wondering if you could comment more on, how that's working, why, I mean, it's pushing a lot of innovation, but like you said, faster than maybe you had initially planned.
Yeah. So I'll take a stab at that first, but I would say that Shay's too kind. My paranoia was finally came in handy, I think, in the spring when we were doing some planning. But yeah, we're really lucky to have someone as talented as Dr. Shay on, who was already pushing us. So Shay took over the academic department in August of last year, really. And from day one was pushing my thinking about what we could be doing for kids. And I'll admit that it was hard for me to think about shifting to more blended approaches across the curriculum. And she was sort of dragging me to the ideas, kicking and screaming at times, but getting me there, right? Because she's really good at what she does. She's student focused and thinks about these things in the right ways. So we were already shifting towards a more blended model and a more fluid model, really, for students, and how students access curriculum, how students access content, and how we could continue to push the bar for all of our kids across the performance spectrum. So for our kids who are, struggling, and for our kids who are hitting it out of the park, we wanted to be able to build a program that was going to push students ahead at the right pace for them. And blended was it was just the logical choice. But as the leader, I was stuck in the mindset of like, how can we do that? Like, is this going to be a risk? Like, what is this going to look like? The big question for me was, how are we going to get our teachers on board? Like, how are we going to get every teacher to say, we're going to build a Google Classroom and actually use that Google Classroom? But to her great credit, Shay was adamant that, well, we just have to get them there. It's on us. It's on our leadership to make it happen. So we got really lucky. It's not the right word to use, but we got lucky in that we had started to do that work. And then, COVID came and really just like pushed us off the ledge. And so all those questions I had didn't matter anymore. We were just doing it. And the mindset work that we might have had to do with teachers, like that became a lot easier too, because they just had to do it. So, I think there's timing involved, like good timing involved for us, great talent in the right places, thinking about kids and how to best serve our students, which really helped out.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask Shay some questions about things like Google Classroom and like Clever, which is like the single sign-on, like Google Meet, and so what are some things you've done to make it like easier for students and families to pick up, and then also ways to like making sure that everybody, not just the teachers, can access parts of the online curriculum, things like that.
Sure. So we're using Google Classroom as our LMS of choice, and I have to say, many of the resources that schools across the country and world are having to use right now are not resources that were designed with K-12 in mind, right? So we're having to adapt a lot. Like we're running into new issues every day because these developments nobody was thinking about how a kindergartner is going to access Google Classroom when they were creating Google Classroom. No one was thinking about how a third grader was going to access Zoom when they created Zoom, right? And so we're retrofitting all of these pre-existing resources into the K-12 environment. And so you have to think differently about the way things work, and you have to create solutions that may not already exist, because you're dealing with something that no one had really thought about initially. So what we did was in the spring, we kind of looked at what our teachers were struggling most with, what parents were struggling most with. It's really helpful to have an ear to social media to know and be able to see what parents around the country are saying about different things, because then we can head off that stuff at Compass Rose, because we know, like we hear it, we read it, we see it. So the biggest things that I noticed or that we all noticed, but that we went forward thinking about was, one, how do we make this curriculum and things accessible to families very quickly and very easily? How do we make sure that teachers are not doing the heavy lifting of like creating rosters for kids and things like that? And how do we make sure that we train parents, students, and teachers on how to use all of these resources, right? Because these resources are great, but there's like 50 different things you're throwing at people all at once, and you're like, go, right? And so it made it really difficult for folks to do their jobs and for parents to help at home while they were also working. So we adopted Clever, which is a single sign-on. There are lots of different options. Some school districts use ClassLink. There's just a lot of different ways that you could do it. Even Google has its own SSO, which most people can see where it says sign in with Google. But we chose Clever, one, because it was specific to schools for obvious reasons, and then also because it was super well known. So it connected with lots of different apps already. So I started working on that process actually in September of 2019. So it just kind of got really accelerated in March, where we actually connected it to the SIS and all of that. So Clever has been really instrumental in creating a portal place where all of our apps live, all of the links to the things live. Even if it's not an app that's already on Clever, we went in and put the link on Clever so that people could just go right there and get to what they needed. So that was the first big thing, is how do you make sure that there's one place you log into to get to all the stuff you need? Very important when you're doing a blended or a virtual program, because you don't want people to have to remember lots of different passwords and usernames and all that stuff. The next thing was, after, like I said, identifying that we were going to use Google LMS, was trying to come up with, make sure that our curriculum could be incorporated into the LMS pretty easily, and that it could be transferred from the face-to-face instruction to the virtual. That's another big thing. Like, as you mentioned, some districts get rid of everything they were doing and then like get all this new curriculum. Some districts just try to stay with it and like fit these square pegs into round holes. And then some learn that, oh, I can mix and match a little bit and make this work for us. And that mixture is, I feel like, the sweet spot. One, you don't want to create huge amounts of learning that your teachers have to do, where they have to learn all these new apps. Administrators have to learn all these new apps, kids have to learn all these new apps. But now on top of all of these new apps and all of the integration issues that might come up from those, now they have to learn a new curriculum, and they have to learn new standards, and they have to learn new assessments, because there was just, we just had a legislative session. So now there's a new test that we have to do in, elementary, right? So you don't want to compound all of this work that teachers have to do by creating all these new systems. So you use curriculum that you've already adopted, or you adopt curriculum that you can train for, and that you can make it easy enough for teachers to pick it up and run with it. So that was really important. And so we also adopted curriculum that had online parts already embedded in it. So it already connected to Google Classroom, or there was already an online platform for it where the teachers could just assign all the work and go from there, right? So that was really important, because now teachers, you just have to teach them how to use this one thing, and they got it, right? And they can move on and do what they need to do. And then being very strategic about the ed tech that you use. You've got Pear Deck, you've got Nearpod, you've got Formative, you have all these different things. But for us at Compass Rose, it was less about requiring teachers to use a specific thing and more about making sure they understood all of the different options available to them and what our expectations were, and then allowing teachers the choice to decide, okay, I'm going to use Nearpod because I'm familiar with Nearpod. So we have some teachers that use Pear Deck, some teachers that use Nearpod, some teachers that just like Google Slides, and that's what they're going to do. And that's okay. Like, we don't need to control down to those things what teachers are doing, right? If you're comfortable with a certain app, use that app. And just make sure that kids have an opportunity to provide feedback to you, and that you can provide feedback to students, and those types of pieces. So doing that, I think, was helpful. We did adopt the Read and Write app, which I think is like one of my favorite apps now, because it does support all of our students. But also our students with special needs, students who have been identified as dyslexic, all of these things. So like, we've got the text to speech, the speech to text, wow, and all of those other things that everyone's got access to, but we are really specific about our subgroups of students using it to their benefit. So just being very strategic about the types of ed tech that you use, so that you're not overwhelming people, and that you make sure people know this is a learning process. Everybody needs grace. This is new for all of us. And wherever we don't do well, we learn from and we move forward. But we don't stick in the, well, this didn't happen right. Well, everything's not going to happen right. But how can we fix it, and how can we keep moving forward?
Yeah, I think that's some amazing. I'm so glad you shared that with us, because I hope that gives like the readers and listeners an idea of how complex this stuff is, and also just how fearless Compass Rose is being about. I know, Paul, you said you're paranoid, but at least paranoid means like you're naming what the dangers are, right? And naming the scenarios, and then people like Shay can go in and go slay those dragons. Go find the ed tech solution that's gonna make that work.
It's amazing to listen to Shay anytime she talks about this, because she's so knowledgeable and so passionate about it, and that's driving the work forward for us, right? That knowledge, that passion, having a champion like Shay on the front lines of this is what has really kept us moving forward, right? At a time that would be incredibly challenging if we were all kind of looking at each other like, okay, what do we do now? Shay herself and leaders across our organization and across the city of San Antonio, the state of Texas, and the country have all done this and just sort of taken the ball and run with it, if I'm mixing metaphors. It's incredible to watch really talented, passionate people do incredible work for kids in such unbelievable circumstances.
I want to be sure and ask about the hub as well. So I'm gonna use a little ed tech myself here. and bring the
The
bring the
hub.
hub on the screen. And
Yeah.
and then this over the summer, I got to also talk to Ryan Burke and let's see, Parker Couch, Parker Couch, who are they're also members of the COVID task force, and they've been involved in things like communication with families and this hub. Well, so right, like Parker was doing a lot of work of like researching and reading and like understanding like what the public health requirements are, what's changing as far as regulations and
Yeah.
Local rules and stuff. And then Ryan's role is that she oversees all the principals, right? And we haven't mentioned yet today the amount of the extraordinary growth, right? So it went from 1 principal to 5 principals, right? With adding the Ingenuity campus.
Correct.
And right, and so maybe I'll send it to Paul to talk more about the hub, and I'll scroll. You can tell me what to click on.
Yeah. So the hub developed early, and this came out of this is Parker Couch. I mean, this is Parker to a T, and Shay was deeply involved in building this as well. But as you suggested, Parker's role through this pandemic response has been kind of our COVID captain. He is the person who, has been following all of the updates and, just sort of our little Dr. Fauci, if you will, on our team. And what we thought when we first thought about our response, and this goes back to first principles for us, was how do we communicate appropriately, and then how do we over communicate? Because our first principle, or one of our first principles, is we need to be the most communicative school any parent has ever sent their child to, or we at least need to aim to be. So our vision for the hub was that we were going to create a site that hosted all of the information that we were gathering, because another thing that we learned, as Shay suggested earlier, was that there's a ton of information flying around out there, right? If you're on any kind of social media, there's like constantly papers being released and people, like, conversations happening, and all of that has helped to some degree inform our work and what we're doing. So we took a lot of information in and just started the learning process, because as you know, educators really are learners at heart. And as we were learning more and more, we realized, like, okay, we can use some of this. Some of this isn't necessarily useful for us. It could be useful for other people. So we sort of bucketed things out. And from that process, we were able to design our return plan, and then build out a communication strategy that would help us roll out that information to all stakeholders. So the hub really is a hub in its purest form. It has information for our staff. So, everything from here are the tools that you can use to here are some tutorials. Shay has done a series of really incredible tutorials on there on how to use certain things, which are really useful for me, to be honest with you, and to others. There are things for our parents. So here's how, if you're trying to help your child with compass rose specific things, here's how you can do it. There's information for our students, and then there's a whole lot of information for others. So we have we have tabs in there of just like the collected information that we found that I've or will at some point just post a direct link to the Charter Moms discussion site, because I think it's useful for anyone. There's also community resources. So for families who are having trouble accessing food or whatever else, you can head. This is the community resource page with legal support service, public health. Each of those links takes you to another page with a series of supports there. We just tried to collect as much information as we could that we think would be useful for folks as we're all trying to navigate this new normal. So that's the sort of community resources page. And then if you go back, there is I don't know if it's virtual learning. Oh, so this was our virtual learning site. We did have on-demand technical support, which was really useful for a while and continues to be useful, just in a different form now. But I think if you go back to that page, I do want to show. Do you remember what the other tab is called, Shay? I can't remember off the top of my head.
For the house, like for the videos.
Oh, third party hubs.
Yeah.
you go to third-party
Oh
hubs.
yeah, I remember this. Yeah, I spent some quality time on this page this summer.
Good. Yeah. So there's resources from CDC. There's the TEA updates and resources. If you keep scrolling, there's Distance Learning Resource Center. TFA has stuff. TNTP. This one, the one called the Distance Learning Resource Center. If you go to just click on parent and family resources, Inga, if you could, there. Yeah, that should bring you to. Is it bringing you there or no?
Let's see. Oh, you know what? Oh, it's a different tab. Sorry.
It's open. It's okay. But anyway.
Yeah, I opened another tab.
All of these resources, like these links will take you to other hubs, third-party hubs that have a series of resources that are useful for parents as we're trying to navigate our new normal, and really for anyone. And we're hoping that it. Yeah, exactly. So if you go here and scroll down, there's just an incredible amount of information available that we tried to capture and make easily accessible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously we didn't do the hard work of collecting all these resources. We're just linking to other folks' work, but we're all in this together, and that's sort of the approach that we've taken. So the hub has, from the very beginning, been our way of tackling this thing on our own and for our families and students, but also being good citizens, helping or trying to help others find the right path forward.
Oh, I'm playing with it again. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
The technology, it's distracting, right? This is the danger of concurrent learning, right?
Shay, do you want to add about how we use the hub internally at Compass Rose, and like what information's there for our faculty, for our staff and our parents?
Yeah, so the hub that's there is like more public facing. And so there is information on there for staff, but we also have an internal facing hub that's just for teachers. And so on that hub, which no one has access to unless you're a Compass Rose person, right? On that teacher hub, we get into more of the specifics of best practices for online learning and supports and like ways and how to do discussion topics and things like that. And then teachers have their own teacher facing instructional videos on how to use different apps. We developed an implementation guide for basically tons of different apps that they could potentially end up using in their classrooms, and just walk them through how to create their logins for that, how to use those types of things. What are some ways that they might use it in their classroom? We also have our blended learning recipients for the Ms. grant. So there's a whole section on just our blended learning grant for Ms. within that teacher page that really guides anyone who wants to know about that particular process, how all of that works. So we use the hubs and websites as a really critical component of our communication because it's really hard when you're sending text messages all the time, or if you're sending emails constantly, or if someone can't log into a video, meeting, but you can always put those resources on the website so that they can get to them themselves. And it's also very helpful for it to be a Google site because it can be changed a lot quicker than your official website can. Especially if you don't, if you're like some schools don't do that themselves, right? There's an outside third party that monitors their websites. So having Google sites allows you to make up-to-date changes immediately. And that was actually one of the reasons we chose to go with Google Sites as our hubs of, and I laugh because we use the word hub so much. They're like, now, like, can we find another word? But yeah, that's one of the reasons we use the Google Sites, is because the change is immediate for everyone.
Yeah, and I would recommend families take a spin through there. Please use those resources. They're publicly available, and they're things that have come to us in our work, and we're happy to share the great work of other people. And there's things there for like homeschooling tips and connections, ideas, lots of great stuff.
Yeah, there's stuff that's widely applicable, not just for Compass Rose families, but like really any family in the Charter Moms community or at whatever school that they're at.
Correct.
Yeah, because it's how we coming together, having good planning and sharing resources and having good information is how we're going to get through this. And I remember the conversation over the summer. Paul, you talked about wanting to treat this, not just to feel like, oh, when is this going to be over? When can we go back to normal? But to see in a more proactive way of like, okay, what could we learn from this? Or like, like Shay talked about, like, how could we accelerate some of the changes that were already underway? And now people see the need for it and they're willing to adopt these changes, maybe more willing than they were before. And how can, Compass Rose work to close the gaps? So I'm wondering if you could, kind of talk more about, the mission of Compass Rose, how you've tried to stay true to the mission, in spite of the pandemic, and how, there may be opportunities that come out of these challenges.
Yeah, it was such an interesting time for us because, as you suggested before, we've done some pretty remarkable growth in the meantime. Like we ended last school year with about 300, just between 300 and 350 kids. And we are sitting right now at about 1,200 students enrolled at Compass Rose schools, which is, that's a lot of growth in one summer, especially when you think about what this summer looked like. So it was, for us, almost necessary to treat this as the new normal, right? We couldn't afford to say, okay, when can we get back to normal? Because no matter what, this year was going to be different for us. We're going to be a lot bigger. We're going to have stronger systems. We're going to go through some growing pains. So in March, it became really clear that treating this as a short-term challenge to overcome was not going to help us, or I would say any school at all. And we had to think, like, how can we hunker down, be ready for the long term, for whatever might come, and then also use this to accelerate our program ahead and to make sure that we're preparing all of our kids for college and a bright future. It was, I think, like, out of necessity, partially because of that growth, because 900 of our kids had never been with us before. We hadn't had the chance for them to understand really what makes us special, all the great things that make us special at the classroom level. We had to quickly transition our program so that they felt that same connection through Zoom, or they felt that same connection through their Google Classroom, or they felt that same connection from a phone call from a staff member. So then for us, it really did go back to, like, who are we as an organization? What do we believe in? And how do we build a program that really reflects that very obviously, especially for the 900 or 1,000 families who have never felt that before. And the easiest way for us was to go back to something that we talked about before, was to think long and hard about how communication would flow. And understanding that, like, especially in time of stress, like, people just want to know, right? There's folks are incredibly resilient and there's a lot of grace, but you have to be, as any public organization, you have to be willing, I think, to communicate and to put in that effort to over communicate even, and then that comes back to you in force, right? The grace comes back to you in force, the resilience you see. If we thought if we weren't over communicating, we would open up lots of opportunities for folks to sort of ask questions and not understand what was going on. And in fact, like, when we do, I think, have challenges, it's when we haven't communicated something well. It's not that we're not doing the right things or we're not working hard enough. It's like, oh, we're just not explaining it well enough. We're not explaining what we're doing or what we're trying to do, or we're not listening well enough. So for us, the everything from the hub to, our communication strategies now, we have a series of weekly meetings still that involve all members of our of all different types of stakeholders. Every week we're getting together to talk about COVID related issues. So we have our stakeholder advisor. I'm going to mess up some of the names of these committees, but I named them all. So I think we have the stakeholder advisory committee, which includes parents and students and teachers and some network staff. They meet weekly to discuss COVID from their lens and how we're responding. We have our crisis response task force, I think is what it's called now. That's our school leaders and our nurses and some network staff, they meet weekly to discuss from their perspective what's happening. And then I have a small task force, which is the Crisis Executive Council, I think we called it, where I take the information from those meetings and just make sort of ongoing decisions about how we move forward. Are we on the right track? Do we have to make changes according to what parents are saying here or school leaders are saying there? And all the hub, that committee structure, all of that was born out of this vision to over communicate. And I would say even on the curriculum side of things, the decisions we made were largely about how can we be partners with families? How can we make sure that our parents and caretakers really are invested in the work? Because we knew, no one knew what it was going to feel like to be a parent during this whole thing, right? Until we all had to do it. But we could predict that it was going to be hard, right? Like it's going to be a challenge for everyone. So our goal was, how do we make this as easy as possible on as many people as possible, especially parents, caregivers who are going to have to be juggling, what we're asking them to do to be invested in their children's education and what they have to do to do their work every day and to live their lives. So that was the heart of our response. And when we, like I said, when we have challenges, I think we first think like, okay, where was the communication breakdown? Where did we mess that up? What could we have done better to listen or to communicate effectively? And that's been really helpful. And the other thing is like we always, in whatever we do, we try to keep families at the front of our mind. That's at the heart of our mission. Is every kid matters. We really want to be partners with our families, and through that we've sort of found our path to like asking our students to continue to challenge themselves, raising the bar for kids, and not asking too much of families, and trying to take on as much of the work ourselves as we can.
Yeah, the communication piece is so important. And so Shay, you are a Compass Rose parent, right? So can you comment from the parent perspective?
Yeah, sure. Yes, my son is a middle schooler at Compass Rose. This is his second year there. And so I have one child at a charter at Compass Rose, and then I have another child at a school in a school district, but like a specialty, whatever you call it, school of choice within a school
district charter, right?
Yeah. And so that one is an elementary school, and Jay's at the middle school. And so it's been interesting. I am always in this like two world thing, right? Like one as a parent, but then also as a network leader. So I really try to, when it's about Jeremiah, only come at it from a parent perspective. Like I don't even use my work email when I communicate with teachers about Jeremiah. Like I do it from my personal, email address, because I just want there to be a very clear separation between those two things.
They still know it's you though.
Yeah, they definitely know
it's me. Fooling
right? Like let me try to make this work in my head. But I would have to say, like, if anything, I'm struggling more with my little one and like making sure we know everything that's supposed to be happening for her. Than I do with Jeremiah. Like I get the phone calls like, hey, just checking in. I'm like, yeah, we're good, and that's it. We know his schedule. And the funny part is like, I think people will assume I know these things because I work for the network, but I don't have anything to do with that aspect of it. Like I don't have anything to do with the scheduling and those types of things. So I just know it because I know that the way it works at Compass Rose is they're going to create a plan that works. And so I can say, and my husband can say, have you checked your Google Calendar? And he's like, oh yeah. And all the links are there. Right. So like, there are just things that I don't have to worry about when it comes to Jeremiah, because I know that Compass Rose does a really good job of communicating. When we're like, oh, we forgot to do that thing, it's like, oh, we should probably check the newsletter because I bet it's in the newsletter. And then we go back and like, yep, it's in the newsletter. It's right there. So I think that has always been one of the things I like most about it, is I can not have to be as concerned about missing something for Jay because I know that there's a newsletter or there's a website or there's somewhere I can go to get the information that I need as a parent for him. My other one, not so much. So we're working on that. I'm feeling a little bit stressed out about that part. But yeah, I think I like that perspective. I also think it is helpful. It makes me do my job a little bit better because I do have access to see what it looks like from a student perspective. So when I'm adopting a thing or I'm creating the video for it, I just log in as my child and I can do it. And, and I can see that process of like, here's what it looks like from a teacher's perspective. Here's what it looks like from an administrator's perspective. Here's what it looks like from a parent. And then here's what it looks like from my child, right? So I have, it's kind of like an unfair advantage because I have all of these different perspectives in one house that I can use to make things easier for folks, in the network.
Yeah. Well, when Paul talks about, having high expectations and high goals, wanting kids to have a brighter future and be ready for college, those are, really ambitious goals, and like adding more students, adding in another campus, but to be able to execute on that, it takes the kind of work that Shay is doing of, like understanding the education technology and, and then all these task forces and teams that are working so hard to communicate and make sure that the families and the staff and students know what's going on. So, so you have really high goals and high expectations, but because you're working so hard on the details and trying so hard to communicate and over communicate, then the follow through is there, right? Although everybody understands that we all need grace because things are complicated during COVID. So, yeah. Well, do y'all have any, I want to give each of you a chance to offer kind of a closing thought, and then we'll kind of wrap up the video. But how about we go to Shay, and then Paul can close it off. Shay, do you have any kind of closing thoughts about how Compass Rose is adapting to school during the pandemic and what you hope, the better future to be like?
Sure. I think, well, like I said, I'm super proud of the work that we've done as a team to prepare and to make sure that our teachers could do their jobs effectively and to make sure that our students had access to high quality materials. I think, we do have really high goals and expectations, and we do have a very aggressive growth plan in place. Hold on, Layla. But I am confident in everybody on our team, and I see us doing it, and doing it well, right? Because we can own where something didn't happen the way we wanted it to, and we can identify how to fix it for the next time. And I think caring about all of our people is at the core of that. So one of the biggest things I'm very excited about and proud about is the work that we're doing as an organization to be inclusive and to make sure that we name the inequities that our students face. We name the institutional racism and all of these things, and that we work together as a team to attack that and to eliminate that and to disrupt the status quo. So even with all of this blended learning piece, that inequity part is huge because you're going to have kids that don't have access to devices. You're going to have kids that don't have access to internet. And so one of the pieces that I'm very proud about is that Compass Rose we have a device for every student, right? We make sure that every child has internet access, either they're on campus or we're talking about how do we get them what they need. We're doing those things to not just make sure that we get our students ready for college if that's where they want to go, but we are acknowledging them as human beings, and we're making sure that our curriculum is, anti-racist, and we've got all of those things going for us. And I think it's a lot. It's a lot of work, and it's hard, but it's really important. And I would not have my child there if I didn't believe in the work that was happening there. And I wouldn't have my child there if I didn't know that we were going to do it, right? If I in any way was concerned about it, he wouldn't be there, but he's there because I know we're going to do it, and it's going to be damn great.
It is. That's wonderful. On that note, I hand it over to Paul. Oh, and
Yeah,
we've
tough to
got a few
follow that.
comments from the Breckenridge Foundation is cheering for us. They say they love what they hear. And also Becca is our she's a wonderful group moderator at SA Charter Moms, and she's really happy to hear this too. So
thanks,
I just wanted to share some good vibes from the Facebook comments.
Yeah.
Okay, so Paul, closing thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, to bring it back to sort of where we started talking about COVID here, I think, you know, we're in our 5th week of instruction now. We had 2 weeks of staff PD prior to instruction starting. So we're about 7 weeks into folks coming to campus every day. Our teachers come to campus and teach from campus. When we opened on August 17th, we were entirely virtual, but we did have students coming to campus to do what we were calling on-site virtual. So over the last 7 weeks, campus has been active. It doesn't look anything like what it would normally look like, but folks have been on campus. Thus far, we haven't had any cases of COVID on campus, which we're really proud of, right? We have, as we talked about this summer, as I'm sure the article that you wrote hits on, like, we've done a ton of work around our policies, our procedures, the things that we need to do to keep families, especially, I mean, our students and our staff safe. Done a ton of work around that. We're really we're constantly adjusting our approaches to make sure that we're keeping up with the times, with the need. But the reality is, like, no school is going to completely eliminate the risk, right? Like, this virus lives in our community, and school is one of thousands of places where people can pick this up. And so we try to keep that in mind too. We try to say we can't completely eliminate risk. What we can do is mitigate spread, and make sure that we are as safe as we can possibly be, and that we're continuing to make the right decisions for our kids across all manners of public health. Because public health means protecting our families, protecting our kids from this virus, but it also means, like, protecting our children's future, right? This is no longer just a public health crisis. This is an education equity crisis, as Dr. Shea just said. So walking that tightrope has been a challenge, but it's the challenge that we need to take on. It's like, when we became educators, we talked about this as an organization. Like, we could have done anything. We chose this work, and with that work, you're choosing a moral calling. Like, education, being an educator, is a moral choice. You're doing work that has a deep moral core to it, and we see that as protecting our kids in every manner possible, protecting their futures as much as we can. So please know, I mean, families, caretakers who are watching this, your schools are working hard to get this right, and we're gonna make it through together. We are all working hard to make sure that we keep children as safe as possible from the virus, but also that we protect their futures by continuing to push to educate. That's what we do. So we're really happy to do it.
Yeah, well, that's a wonderful message, and just like how the hub is relevant for families at Compass Rose, but also families beyond Compass Rose. That your message that, right, you're trying to protect the health of all the stakeholders, right, the students, their families, the teachers, but you're also trying to protect their future so that they can have choices. They, if they choose to go to college, they'll be ready. They'll feel comfortable in their identity, and because they'll have an anti-racist education, and they'll be confident about who they are and what they can do with their lives. And I think that's these are beautiful messages. That's why I'm really proud to have a blog post and to have this interview, so that I hope more people learn about the great work that's happening at Compass Rose. And if you're a family in San Antonio, you can apply. Pop the website. Apply for enrollment. There's still open seats in some grades, right? Like maybe middle school or So, and I hope that, I know that Compass Rose is part of a task force that's helping the education commissioner to figure out what best practices are, and what are the innovative schools in Texas. And so other districts can learn from the good work that y'all are doing. So thank you so much for being on Charter Moms Chats, and I look forward to be able to see you guys in person someday.
Yeah, Inga, thank you so much for having us. It's always a pleasure.
All right.
All right. Take care.